Were you having hallucinations, or was it, what was that referring to, that title?
Indeed I was. Actually, it was just ramblings, because I was just stuck there, feeling bad in this miserable life. So I was just writing, and my writings were no more than hallucinations of more or less a madman, really.
You mentioned that you were writing by the light of the stove. Were you always writing at night? Was this something you tried to hide from the people you were with?
I used to write during the day and during the night, but mostly it was during night, using that stove like a lantern, because we had no electricity there at all. But sometimes it ran out of fuel, and I continued writing, just scribbling, and when it was daylight, I look at my writings and find that all the lines are crossed together, and I try to make some sense of it and rewrite them clearly.
Can you possibly read us a short extract from Uruk's Anthem to give us a sense of what this poem was becoming?
نعم.
Yes, of course.
أخرج من طرف البطانية رأسا كثا.
Why does the war break me in two? Why does night become a soldier's boot weighed down by mud stamping on my chest? I shall try to write at night, stealing light from flares. We talked until morning about revolutionary poetry and fear of the critics. The barber, Abu Kukur, got fed up. He stuck out of the blankets a thick-haired head that was good for nothing but swearing. Hello, country of forgotten poets without a nation. If I had time, I would go into the National Library and list the names of books swallowed in the belly of the censor. Why had the censor of poetry cut my first sky? And why did you angrily stub out your cigarette?
I love that image. Books as a sky to look into. Did you share this poem with your fellow detainees?
بالحقيقة هم ما كانوا.
Well, to be honest, without being disrespectful, the other conscripts were not exactly well educated. However, they used to listen to me very attentively, with great respect.
So the war ended in 1988, and the following year, your poem, which still wasn't finished, inspired a play that was put on in Baghdad. And that went down very well, and there was another production of another part of the poem a few years later, in 1993, poem still not finished. And this time, it got a lot of attention from people who were not at all pleased. Tell us what happened.
مثل ما قلت إنه القصائد تحمل.
The theatre was packed, and Hakim Jassim, the actor, his performance was very well received, to the point that we had several minutes long standing ovations. People, all the audience were up on their feet applauding, and this reverberated across the Iraqi capital Baghdad and also beyond it. And that's how the authorities and their informants and secret services began to study the poem, and they realized that actually it is more apparent on theater, those hidden meanings. As I explained earlier, all my writing was not explicitly criticizing the authorities, but when it was voiced out on stage, they paid more attention to it. And that's how they thought this could be critical of the authorities.
What kind of feedback, shall I say, did you get from the authorities that made you think that you really ought to leave the country?
في اليوم الثاني الوكيل.
The following day, the Deputy Minister of Culture summoned all the crew and all the cast who took part in this play.
استمر التحقيق فترة طويلة.
The cast and the crew were interrogated for a very long time, after which the Deputy Minister decided that putting an end to this play would cause more publicity and more trouble in Iraq. And so he decided that the performance can continue provided that certain parts are deleted. And he said that he would decide which parts himself to remove from the performance so that it would be considered safe. However, the director refused and said either I produce it as it is and perform every night as it is, or we're not showing it at all. And the deputy minister said, this is not your choice or mine, this is orders from high up.
ثم بعد ذلك
So the authorities decided to let the play continue for another month while they made preparations to bring it to a close without causing much fuss publicly. And they were planning, as I was informed, to eliminate us, me, the writer, the crew, the cast, everyone who took part in it. So some friends of mine who were worried about me and my safety decided that I should actually leave the country. And they took advantage of the timing of Jordan's Jarash festival, which is very well known. So the officials at Jarash festival invited me to take part in their festival, and that's how I managed to get out of Iraq.
And you made your way from Jordan to Lebanon, where in 1996 you eventually finished writing Uruk's Anthem and published it, and pretty much immediately found yourself on a death list published by Saddam Hussein's son, Uday. How did you come to hear of that?
أشوف في يوم من الأيام في جريدة بابل اللي هو رئيس تحرير
I found out one day that at the Babel newspaper, which had the editor-in-chief in the form of Uday Saddam Hussein, he wrote that I write criticizing the Iraqi regime and authorities, and he list of 15 people whom he deemed anti-Iraq. My name was top of the list, and he called it the death list.
What is it like to read your name on a death list?
هو تماما يعني أنا مرة وصلت
You know, writing in Iraq is like walking through a minefield, and you should expect that one of the landmines is going to blow up any second now and take you with it.
فهنا أنا يعني أخذت
I won't deny that I was scared. I was scared for my own life. I was scared for my own family as well. And because I was a refugee in Lebanon, the United Nations there was aware of my presence, and they told me that for my own safety, I should go as far away from Iraq as possible. And they said there is this town called Lolia in the far north of Sweden, just near the Arctic Circle, where the temperature there drops to minus 36 Celsius.
And you coming from a hot country, you call Sweden the land of snow.
بالضبط وهذا حدث يعني.
You know, one of the paradoxes is that I come from a hot country, and it's hot in terms of temperature of the weather, but also in terms of events. There was the Iraq-Iran war, followed by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, so that's how hot Iraq is. And going to Sweden, where it is both cold, as in safe, and the temperature is low.
Did you find a warm welcome, at least?
نعم هو هذا يعني
It wasn't only a warm welcome, but it was a very warm embrace. Because in Sweden, I became a member of the Swedish Union of Writers. 2 of my books were published in Sweden, so it's a total contrast to the heat and lack of welcome in Iraq. I felt at home in Sweden.
What impact did it have on the way you write to be in a country where freedom of expression is protected and no longer a dangerous activity?
نعم كثير فتحت آفاق يعني.
You know, when you've spent a long time in a prison, once you leave that prison, you could hardly walk because the space inside the prison is extremely limited. And that's what Iraq was to my writings. While in Sweden, it was freedom, and all I could see before my very eyes is the horizon. So the sky became the limit to my writings and my thinking and my aspirations.
You wrote a poem called Passage to Exile. Would you read a little for us?
وطني حزين أكثر مما يجب.
My homeland is sad beyond necessity, and my songs are aggressive, refractory, and shy. I will stretch out on the first sidewalk I reach in Europe and hold my legs up for the pedestrians to show them the traces of school bastinados and the ones from jails, those that got me here. What I carry in my pocket is not a passport, but a history of oppression.
It sounds like you had very mixed feelings towards Iraq and towards exile. You moved to London after a few years in Sweden, to the city of fog from the land of snow, as you put it. Is living in London has it been a different exile experience for you?
هو أقل
Exile in London is a bit different, I would say, because it is less heavy, less painful. There are lots of similarities, you might be surprised, between London and Baghdad. For example, the river Thames in London and Tigris in Baghdad, the double-decker red buses, they are the same. And also in London, there is quite an old Iraqi community. They've been here for a very long time, so they make things more bearable.
ولا زال أمارس نفس
And there is something that I brought from Iraq and I still do in London, and that is to take the bus and go on the upper deck and sit right at the very front to watch everything around. I do the same thing here in London.
I know you were anxious to get back to Iraq, and you took the first opportunity you had, which was in 2006, so 10 years after you left and after the American-led invasion of Iraq, and you went to read your poetry at a festival. And of course the old regime had gone by then, but you discovered that you still have enemies there.
هو ليس أعداء وإنما الفكرة.
It's not a matter of enemies, but going back to Iraq then, I thought that with the fall of Saddam Hussein and his regime, that dictatorship in Iraq would be long gone and finished. But it wasn't, because dictatorship is not only military. There are other forms of it. And when you are repressed, your ideas are repressed, your freedom of expression is repressed, that is all dictatorship.
What happened to you there at that poetry festival?
وكان يوم الأقرب.
It was a wonderful event because I was so happy as well to meet some old friends and catch up with them. And I read some passages from a poem that I called Slightly Troublesome Texts. But after I finished, an angry man came to me on stage and told me, "Why are you attacking religion?"
وسنقطع لسانك على.
And this man told me that if I didn't stop, they would cut off my tongue. I was at a loss. I was just taken aback. I didn't know what to do. But some of my friends there decided that it was not safe for me to stay, and they actually smuggled me across the desert to Kuwait. And from Kuwait, I came back to London.
Right. What would it take, do you think, for you to be able to go back and live in Iraq as a poet, free to express yourself in any way you choose?
هو فقط
Iraq is an absolutely fascinating and wonderful country. It has wonderful people. They are really kind and warm and hospitable. And it has brilliant history from Sumer to Babylon to Assyria. But what it really needs is true, genuine freedom so that everyone can thrive.
Poetry has clearly shaped your entire life. It's brought you fame, and it's led you into exile. Is poetry worth it?
هو الشعر هو الإنسان.
Poetry is life. Poetry is humanity. And humanity is worth it. Life is worth it. But what I really need is freedom and safety for my poem, because that would be freedom for life and freedom for humanity too.
I was speaking to Iraq's famous poet, Adnan Al-Sayegh. The interpreter was Yusuf Taha. For the first time, substantial extracts from Uruk's anthem have been published jointly in English and Arabic. The book is called Let Me Tell You What I Saw. We'll have more from Outlook after a news update.
This is the BBC World Service, revealing the Kenyan warriors who are now elephant caretakers.
We walk with them in the bush and we sleep with them in the night. That bond that we have is such strong. Sometimes they are not feeling well. You also feel like you are not okay.
This is a story about people and the animals they protect.
He lost a big part of his trunk. Unfortunately, he got beaten off by a hyena.
Diverse tribes and ethnic groups all coming together.
We have Turkana, we have Pokot, we have Somali, and we understand we were not in good relationship with them before because we normally fight because of our green pastures.
Hear how elephants became a catalyst for peace. With me, Michael Kaloki.
All those elephants has brought us together.
Warrior Elephant Guardians, Tuesday at 9:20 GMT.
Coming up in part 2 of Outlook, why a Californian scuba diver risks his life to retrieve people's treasures lost to the water.
They can't wrap their head around the fact that they're actually looking at something they thought was going to be lost forever. I get to go find it for them and just hand it back. And it's just, I don't know, I've got a smile from ear to ear right now just thinking about it.
The man who calls himself Merman Mike after the latest from the BBC Newsroom.
BBC News with Aaron Safir. A French court has given lengthy jail terms to some of those found guilty of helping Islamist attackers in Paris nearly 6 years ago. The fugitive widow of one of the militants was sentenced in her absence to 30 years in prison. In all, 17 people died in the assaults on the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish supermarket. The World Health Organization has announced that a team of international scientists will travel to China next month to investigate the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Beijing has been reluctant to allow an independent inquiry, leading to diplomatic rows with a number of countries. Armenia says dozens of volunteer soldiers in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh have been taken prisoner by Azerbaijani forces. The Armenian Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, said they were held in an area where there had been breaches of a Russian-backed ceasefire in recent days. A coroner in Britain has ruled that air pollution contributed to the death of a 9-year-old girl in London. Ella Adu-Kisi Deborah died following an asthma attack. She'd been admitted to hospital numerous times. The governor of Katsina State in northwest Nigeria has told the BBC that the gunmen who kidnapped hundreds of schoolboys last week are well-known local criminals with links to Boko Haram. The governor says that they have demanded money, but stressed that they would not be paid. Slovakia has become the latest European Union country to head back into lockdown. Nearly 8,000 new cases were recorded on Tuesday. Earlier, the EU chief, Ursula von der Leyen, promised that vaccinations would begin next week. A Chinese space capsule containing the first moon rocks collected in over 4 decades has landed in the Inner Mongolia region. The Chang'e 5 probe spent 3 weeks in space, taking rocks and soil from the moon's ocean of storms, a vast lava plain. BBC News.
Hello, welcome back to Outlook. I'm Jo Fidgen. This half, 2 men putting smiles on people's faces. We'll be hearing later from Tim Conahan, who teaches would-be Santas how to be jolly and how to answer tricky questions from kids who don't believe in Father Christmas. But our first stop is California, to meet a scuba diver who specialises in finding precious objects that have been lost underwater. It can be dangerous work, and he doesn't make money from it. Our reporter Saskia Edwards has been discovering why he does it.
Mike Pele loves finding lost underwater treasures. Before I did this story, I'm not even sure I knew it was possible to record someone yelling while scuba diving. Watch a few of Mike's videos and you'll soon realize it's possible. He's so enthusiastic about his marine missions, he's given himself another name, Merman Mike. And do you feel kind of like some sort of underwater creature when you're scuba diving?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I have a lot of people call me Aquaman. I wouldn't go that far. I feel like I could probably further relate to the Little Mermaid. But I love it down there, especially when like the wildlife actually comes up to you and they're inquisitive because they're like, well, what are you doing down here?
What he's doing down there is trying to find valuables, precious things lost at the bottom of California's rivers and waterways. So what kind of things have people asked you to dive for?
Rings, phones, lockets, bracelets. A big one's also fishing poles.
This isn't just a hunt for Mike. Scuba diving is also a kind of therapy for him.
As soon as my head goes underwater, like all other problems, thoughts, and concerns immediately go away. And it's just, I'm focused on that next piece of treasure. I can't have time to think about any of the other problems going on in the world while I'm down there.
So where did you discover scuba diving?
My dad has always been a scuba diver, and that kind of sparked my interest of wanting to go scuba diving. I've always had a fascination with like underwater exploration, and it always just kind of boggled my mind of how there's so much of our planet left unexplored, yet we're still going to other planets to explore them first.
Mike got his scuba license and would dive with friends. He knew about this concept of underwater Samaritans who'd recover lost objects. But his hunting wouldn't start seriously until he was out one day, diving in a lake, when he came across a young guy who'd lost his phone while on a family kayaking trip.
They flagged me over and said, oh my God, my son just dropped his phone in the water. Is there any way you would be able to help me? And I was super low on air. We were actually just about to go in, but I said, yeah, not a problem. I'll go down and see what I can do. And it was like, I think the last 2 or 3 breaths of air I had left, I ended up finding it.
From there, people started finding out about Mike because he videos all of his searches and puts them on YouTube. He started uncovering all sorts of things, some things he was looking for people, and some not. And you've accidentally found a bunch of other stuff too, like some really weird things as well, right?
Oh gosh, yes. I found a voodoo doll that was taped around a rock.
What?
Yeah, at the bottom of the river. Funny enough, a week later, I ended up getting in an accident that totaled my truck, and my girlfriend still to this day blames the voodoo doll.
Oh, that's spooky.
I found a really old, like, silver locket that had this black and white picture in it. Multiple bags of cremations that I've spread on the bottom of the river. Like, there was one day where I found a ring, a gun, and then something a little X-rated.
And, is it right that you have a treasure room?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first room in my house specifically, so people can't come through my house without me basically bombarding them about my treasure room.
And what does it look like?
It's cram-packed. Phones, sunglasses, keys, different sorts of trinkets. There's vapes, there's drones, there's a bicycle, scooters.
Mike doesn't throw away anything he finds, in case the object's owner comes looking for it in his treasure room one day. So when you return things to people, how do they react?
I like to say it's kind of like their eyes are having a battle with their brain. They can't wrap their head around the fact that they're actually looking at something they thought was going to be lost forever. Mm-hmm. I get to go find it for them and just hand it back. And it's just, I don't know, I've got a smile from ear to ear right now just thinking about it.
And you do it for free, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mike can laugh and smile about his hobby, but as far as hobbies go, it's a pretty dangerous one. Dozens of people drown every year in the waterways where he dives. And he's had some close calls while searching himself. Turns out his enthusiasm is a health hazard.
I ended up almost blacking out down there. I got way too excited. I was trying to fight the current. And that was an extremely scary feeling just because obviously if you go unconscious down there, there's not much you or anybody else can do. I just basically had to mentally tell myself you need to calm down or you're going to end up passing out.
But it's not too dramatic to say that you're basically risking your life when you go and dive for these things.
Anytime anybody goes diving, their life is on the line. I mean, it's a dangerous game.
One person who Mike has taken the plunge for is Karen Barris. Hey, Karen, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, Mike.
Karen saw one of Mike's videos and sent him a message. She needed help.
Yeah, I had gone kayaking. I had tipped my kayak, and I recovered everything except for a camera. that had photos from years past. A lot of them of my mom. She had passed away since then. And we had gone on some trips that were very meaningful for her. All those photos were on the camera, and I never took the time to download them onto my computer or anything, so they were just basically lost.
After a couple of failed attempts and a lengthy kayak journey, armed with a camera and metal detector, Mike's search began. Did you feel quite a lot of pressure?
I did. I wanted to make her day, and I would have felt awful if we went out there 2 times and I still didn't have any results for her.
And so you kayaked for 45 minutes and then you jumped in. How did the search begin?
There was a tree that was now underwater. We don't like underwater trees because there's a lot of snagging hazards involved with underwater trees. So I was going to basically do a quick perimeter check to see if I could see it with my eyes. And I had the metal detector in my hand, not realizing really it was on. And it ended up buzzing in my hand while I was looking somewhere else. So I looked down and I went over it again and it buzzed again. So I stuck my hand through the silt and I would say about 4 inches down, ended up feeling the little square and brought it up. And I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. And it was like, I think 5 minutes or so. It was a very short amount of time.
Yeah, it was quick.
And yeah, how did you react, Karen?
I couldn't believe he found it.
Not a problem. Like I said, the camera might not work anymore, but hopefully the SD card is still good.
Like, oh my gosh. And it was so quick. It was like he was down and 5 minutes later he surfaced and he's got my camera.
And were you able to get the photos back?
I was able to get all the pictures back. It was pretty incredible. Those SD cards are pretty resilient.
And what was it like seeing the pictures again?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was nice to see all the memories come back.
In particular, memories of trips to Germany and the UK, when her mum was able to meet long-lost relatives.
And that was right around the time she started really slipping and then passed away shortly after that. So it was just nice. It was just nice to have the good memories back.
Honestly, I teared up a lot. She sent me an extremely heartwarming letter. I wasn't aware of the importance of the pictures on the camera or the fact that they involved like basically bucket list vacations with her mother that had passed away, and my grandmother who raised me has also passed away. And I pictured how it would feel to get just a treasure trove of pictures of me and my grandma back that I thought was gone forever.
It was just nice to see that there are still people who go out and help other people, just do it out of the goodness of their hearts without expecting anything in return.
Karen is just one of many of Mike's success stories. And Mike, do you think you'll ever give this up?
Absolutely not. I mean, unless all the water in the world dries up, it's this euphoric, happy place for me, and I call it my underwater therapy, and I never want to lose that.
So you're a committed merman.
Oh, absolutely. If I could give up my legs and switch it in for a tail, I would in a heartbeat.
Mike Pelly, aka Merman Mike. He was speaking to Saskia Edwards. This is Outlook. Can you believe there is an International University of Santa Claus where you can get a doctorate in clausology? It's run by Tim Conahan, America's national Santa Claus. He's appeared in hundreds of TV commercials and magazine adverts over the past 50 years and now passes on his Santa wisdom to others. He spoke to Outlook's Colm Flynn in 2017.
You do get kids that come to you and say, well, my friends told me there's no Santa, you know. And so I just sit there and I kind of touch my tummy and feel my beard, and I say, well, I feel real. Are you real?
Santa, it's great to meet you.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to meet you, too.
When did you get into town?
Oh, well, I'm always in every town. You know, you just have to look for me.
This is Tim Conahan, and he's the real deal. For almost 50 years, he's been a Santa here in the US and is in huge demand.
Well, I'm from an Irish Catholic family with 11 children, and I was the oldest. And Christmas was always a big event at our house. and very enjoyable and everything. And little did I realize that all along, all the things that have happened in my life was probably God's way of preparing me and training me to put on the red suit.
For Tim, being Santa started in a very unusual way, as a soldier in the Vietnam War.
In 1969, in Vietnam, a friend of mine at Christmas, December 23rd, 1969, I remember the date, went and got a can of Barbasol shaving cream and made a big pile of shaving cream and put it on his face like a beard. And then he came out, and there was Santa Claus, a 20-year-old guy with shaving cream on his face, and he sat down in a folding chair, and all of us got to sit down on his lap. After about a half hour, that shaving cream was kind of melting and falling away. So I put on some shaving cream and took his place for about 15, 20 minutes.
That was Tim's first taste of being Santa. And the following year, he returned to the US and got a job in a department store. And that Christmas, when their Santa didn't show up, they turned to Tim.
Here I was, 21 years old. I said, yeah, they were offering me more per hour than I was making normally. So I put on the suit and took an eyebrow pencil and kind of made some look like wrinkles around my eyes. The day after Thanksgiving, on a Friday, I sat down in the chair and right next to the toy department and it was Santa for everybody. And it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Tim graduated from college in journalism and then got a job in a music radio station.
Country Western, if you believe. And I'm from Los Angeles area, so I didn't have a twang, but all of a sudden I was, hi friends, and had a little bit of a twang. And
was it an AM station?
It was a good old AM station,
yeah,
Bakersfield, California. I was a disc jockey and moved into being a news director. So it would be, hi friends, and I'd be talking like this, and here's the news, and here's Tim Conahan. Thank you, Tumbleweed. It's great. So I would change voices. What do you like in the classroom?
Math.
Math. Excellent. Now, are you into sports too?
Yeah.
What's your favorite sport?
Baseball.
Baseball. Okay, that's great. Now, the big question I need to know, what's on your Christmas list?
A multiplication board. Like something I can practice.
Okay, that's a good idea. Okay.
While working in radio, Tim was still Santa every Christmas in his local supermarkets and shopping malls. And a number of years ago, noticing the demand for really authentic Santas, he started a training school.
Well, it's called School for Santas is the nickname. It's actually the International University of Santa Claus. And I've been teaching this is going on my 16th year now. I've had over 3,700 Santas and a few Mrs. Claus graduate from my school.
And one of the things he teaches his Santa students is that if they naturally look like St. Nicholas, then they pretty much have to play the part all year round.
When you have a real beard, even when it's not Christmas, you need to possibly keep in character when the children come to you. You may be on vacation, but that you're still Santa to them and they want to know why you're here. I want the children to keep believing.
Tim, is it difficult to be Santa nowadays because kids have never been so savvy?
They've been told by their parents, Santa's real. Santa's going to bring something for you if you're good. And then his friends are at school are saying, oh no, your mom and dad are Santa. Santa's not real. And that child's in a quandary. He doesn't know what to do. So he's going to gamble. He's going to go see Santa and make sure Santa knows what he wants for Christmas, just in case Santa is real.
But I'm even thinking of life's more complicated questions, like children whose parents are getting a divorce, or maybe their parents are in the military or in prison.
Well, that is a unique thing about being Santa Claus. To most children, he is real. And he also grants wishes. Now, Santa's magic is really toys. So he can't really grant those immaterial wishes. But you let the child know that they're loved. Now, if they mention that Grandma passed away and they want her to come back, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can tell you loved your grandma very much. And maybe she's somewhere right now looking at you, watching you visit me, and she loved you very much. You've got to remember, most of these visits with Santa are 1 or 2 minutes. That's it. Hi there. What's your name?
Dara.
And how old are you, Dara?
6.
6 years old. And what do you want for Christmas this year?
Deer.
You mean like the reindeer? Like Rudolph?
A puppy.
A puppy? But you know, Santa's magic is toys, so I don't always bring puppies. But if you're ready for... Today I had someone ask me if they could have an elf. A real elf. Real elf? Why do you want a real elf? And she says, I want one to do my homework for me. I said, oh.
That's a smart kid.
I said, wait a minute, you have to do your own homework. You have to, school is good for you. You get smarter, and so you have to do your own homework.
Final question, Santa. Is the magic of Christmas real?
The magic of Christmas will always be there. It's one of the unique things about mankind. We all have compassion to our fellow man. And whether you are a follower of Santa Claus or St. Nicholas, or whatever your belief, you probably in your soul, in your heart, want to help others and do things for them.
Santa, it was great meeting you, and a very happy Christmas.
A happy Christmas to everybody out there, and of course a prosperous New Year.
Colm Flynn was speaking to the quintessential Santa, Tim Conahan. Tomorrow on Outlook, the adventures of an Australian wine merchant who was let into one of the best-kept secrets in the business, the whereabouts of a mythical wine collection that had belonged to Stalin and the last Tsar of Russia. It is a great tale. Hope to see you here, same time tomorrow.
Now on the BBC World Service, witness history with me, Bethan Head. And today we're travelling back in time to 1974 and an early experiment in reality TV in the UK. Simply called The Family, this fly-on-the-wall documentary series first aired in April 1974 on the BBC. The series followed the Wilkins family, who lived in the English town of Reading.
It gives us a chance to portray ordinary people.
There will be people who will object to your behaviour.
Well, people don't have to listen to us.
Marion Wilkins, now Archer, was the eldest daughter in the family. At the time, Marion was engaged to Tom Burns, who later became her husband in their televised wedding.
Marion Wilkins, aged 19, is Tom's fiancée. A fully trained manageress of a ladies' hair salon, she has lived with Tom on and off for 3 years.
From the offset, it dealt with controversial topics such as Marion living with her boyfriend before marriage.
I'd already left home, moved in with Tom, which was, absolutely terrible in that day. People frowned upon frowned upon my mum, bless her, for allowing her daughter to live with her boyfriend under her roof. Yeah, well, I guess we were a bit shocking at that point, but it was the way it was.
3 generations of the Wilkins family all lived in a flat above a shop. The programme wanted to show all aspects of their daily life, without dressing it up, including any arguments or rows.
All you had on TV to gauge anything by was the soaps. That's all made up. People don't really live like that. And we were the first programme to show that people do really live like that. And in actual fact, their circumstances are probably worse than that. Families as a unit have to decide how to deal with their own issues, their own problems and so on. That still holds today. It did then. We see it all the time today. We didn't see it back then. We just had pretend stuff. We were showing it for real.
Marion and her mother Margaret were flicking through the local newspaper, and that's where they first saw the advert about the family.
She pointed it out to me, and it was the BBC looking for a family to take part in a programme. And it was quite bizarre, really, because what they were looking for fitted us. Their criteria was basically us.
They were duly chosen, and in January 1974, filming started. None of the family members were used to TV cameras, so the crew had to ease them in.
What they did was they put us through sort of like some exercises, if you like, whereby we had a tape recorder behind the sofa, and he would want us to sort of like sit around in the room and just have a chat and try and sort of like forget that the tape recorder was there. The idea was for us to obviously get used to having them around. Then later on they'd start walking around with a camera, and so we had to then ignore the camera.
There were no big studio lights, just brighter bulbs.
We had, well, I'm assuming 100-watt light bulbs in every room. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. There were really bright light bulbs in every room in the house. So there was no big lighting lamps or anything like that. They filmed us watching our first episode. It was really exciting in a way, but you looked at it like you look at old photographs. It was like, oh my God, do I really look like that? Do I really speak like that? Oh, I can't believe you said that. Oh my goodness, you know. So, yeah, we found it a little bit surreal, really. And the odd thing is, you think it's just you that's watching it.
But Marion quickly realised that lots of people were watching it when they started approaching her in the street.
They'd look at you a bit oddly and you'd know that they've recognised us. Some would come up to you in the street. That happened a bit later on when the programme had been on a while.
Marion's favourite memory of the programme is her wedding to her fiancé at the time, Tom Burns. It didn't always seem like it was going to happen, but thanks to Mum Margaret, they pulled it off.
My mum was like, pulled her sleeves up and said, right, let's get on with this. Let's make a wedding. She arranged my wedding dress. That was borrowed from her friend. I have to say, quite honestly, I didn't like the dress very much, but I didn't want to upset my mum, so I agreed to the dress. We had the local pub that dealt with everything, so we had a reception there. We were very lucky, we had a lot on our doorstep. Our only hurdle, we had a Methodist church literally just over the road, and we thought, OK, we'll pop over there. That was the stumbling block, of course, is sort of like you don't film weddings. Oh, no. The vicar over there, he allowed them to take stills, which is that part of the programme you can see.
Can you arrange this piece for me?
I've got to say that it was amazing. It was full of all the things that sort of like weddings have, things going wrong, things not turning up on time. You know, my sister having a tantrum because this wasn't the flower she wanted and so on.
That's not what I asked for, and that's a really dark pink. It's not going to go in my dress.
Don't start on me.
I know, but it's not a bit what I asked for. Mum asked me what I wanted.
Do you like it?
But the actual wedding itself, when everybody was at the church and so on, I felt like royalty. I felt like Lady Muck, I can tell you. It was just because the only weddings on TV then were royalty. It was Princess Anne's wedding that was on. And that's how I felt. I mean, there were crowds in the road. I didn't know what it was like to feel like a celebrity, but I felt like a celebrity or royalty. Having police escorts in and out of the place, and it was just something else. I mean, it was an amazing day, and it's going to take a lot to beat that.
But not everyone in the crowds outside the church approved of Marion's wedding, or the programme.
I was very shocked in the beginning, but honest, you get to know the family, really. You feel as if you know them now, and it's not so bad.
No, I think it's dirt. I really do. I think that the television is putting on a lot of dirt lately.
The series also provoked racist reactions from some viewers because 15-year-old Heather, the youngest daughter, was dating a mixed-race boy called Melvin.
It was one of those things that, at the time, we were a little bit shocked. Heather's got herself a mixed-race boyfriend, are we sure about this? But we knew that sort of like nobody really sort of like paid that much mind. I don't think they paid much mind to it. I think it was the first time I'd ever heard of racism when people complained to the BBC about how could that girl have a mixed-race boyfriend, a black boyfriend. Bless her, she did get a bit of stick. But the BBC, I must say, were excellent at keeping some stuff from us. But Heather was a strong individual. She is a strong individual. And she dealt with it really, really well. I just think it made her stronger. I am extremely proud of it. I think we all are to a certain degree. Obviously, Mum's not here to speak, but my mum would say exactly the same. for us to have started that, Mum and I were extremely proud of what happened and what it showed. And it's nice to have something that, one, has gone down in history, two, is out there for everyone to see. The fact that we have that is just a real legacy.
Marion Archer, formerly Wilkins. She was speaking to me, Bethan Head, for Witness History.
This is the BBC World Service. What can a body reveal about a person's life?
Beethoven, the composer of some of the world's most famous pieces of music. After his death in 1827, his autopsy revealed he was suffering from numerous ailments. I'm Georgia Mann, exploring how Beethoven's illnesses became a part of his music.
Dissecting Beethoven. Sunday at 14 GMT. And in 30 minutes, Sport Today with Adi Adadoin.
It's the Premier League leaders against the Premier League champions tonight. Tottenham against Liverpool. Will Jose Mourinho's mind games work against Jurgen Klopp? We'll have the details of the first managerial sacking in English Premier League this season and look ahead to one of the most eagerly anticipated matchups in world cricket.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Janat Jalil. A court in France finds 14 people guilty of involvement in the attacks on Charlie Hebdo magazine staff and a Jewish supermarket.
What this decision says is that without these networks, there is no attack. Without these networks, there is no terrorism.
After months of wrangling with China, the WHO says a team of international scientists will go to Wuhan next month to investigate the origins of COVID-19. In what's thought to be a world first, air pollution has been ruled to be a cause in the death of a child. And Tom Cruise tears into workers on the set of his latest Mission Impossible film for ignoring COVID safety rules. Plus, how to go carol singing safely in the time of coronavirus. That's after this bulletin.
Hello, I'm Aaron Safir with the BBC News. A French court has convicted 14 people, mainly known criminals, in connection with Islamist attacks that shook France in 2015. The case centred on contacts of Amédi Coulibaly, a militant who carried out assaults on the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish supermarket. Reporting from Paris, Lucy Williamson.
Those convicted today were the contacts and accomplices behind the violence that changed France. Men like Ali Reza Pola, sentenced to 30 years in prison for complicity in the attacks. More than a dozen others were convicted of the lesser crime of terrorist association. 7 were cleared of any specific link to terrorism. Since the attacks 5 years ago, more than 200 people have been killed in Islamist terrorism here. 2 months ago, teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded in a suburb of Paris after showing his class cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, reprinted by Charlie Hebdo to mark the start of this trial.
A Chinese space capsule containing the first moon rocks collected in over 4 decades has landed in the Inner Mongolia region. The Chang'e 5 probe spent 3 weeks in space, taking rocks and soil from the moon's ocean of storms, a vast lava plain. Scientists hope the samples will help them understand the formation, structure and history of the moon. Armenia says dozens of volunteer soldiers in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh have been taken prisoner by Azerbaijani forces. There has been no word from the government of Azerbaijan. Rehan Dmitry reports.
Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said that several dozen Armenian soldiers had been captured by Azerbaijani forces in the southeastern corner of Nagorno-Karabakh, close to the village of Khtsabert. He added that Russian peacekeepers deployed to the area were under siege. Last week, fresh fighting broke out between Azerbaijan and Armenia over 2 villages. The fighting took place on a strip of land Armenian forces still control, sandwiched between a buffer zone occupied by Russian peacekeepers and territory recently recaptured by Azerbaijan.
A coroner in Britain has ruled that air pollution contributed to the death of a 9-year-old girl in London in a landmark decision. Ella Adu Kisi-Debra, who lived near a major road in London, died in 2013 of an asthma attack following years of illness. Her mother Rosamond says Ella will be remembered globally.
Her legacy would be to bring in a new Clean Air Act and for governments, I'm not just talking about the UK government, governments around the world to take this matter seriously. 7 million people die every year due to air pollution, and it hasn't got the public health emergency which it deserves. And hopefully this will change that.
This is Aaron Safir with the latest world news from the BBC. The US President-elect Joe Biden has said he's underlining his commitment to diversity after nominating Pete Buttigieg as the first openly gay member of a US cabinet. Announcing Mr. Buttigieg as his choice for Transportation Secretary, Mr. Biden described the 38-year-old as a military veteran with a new voice and new ideas. Mr. Buttigieg said he was mindful that the eyes of history were on him. Police in the Indian capital Delhi have arrested more than 50 people who are accused of involvement in a criminal international call centre. It's the latest in a series of raids on Indian call centres accused of cybercrimes. Our South Asia editor Jill McGivering reports.
Investigators say the call centre targeted people living overseas, including in the US. Its workers followed an elaborate script, posing as officers with various law enforcement agencies and telling their victims they were being investigated because bank accounts in their names were being used by drug cartels. Victims were told their assets were being frozen, and if they wanted to avoid legal action, they needed to pay a hefty fee. They'd allegedly taken more than $13 million from more than 4,500 people. Officials say the call centre owner lives in Dubai.
The governor of Katsina State in northwest Nigeria has told the BBC that the gunmen who kidnapped hundreds of schoolboys last week are well-known local criminals with links to Boko Haram. Governor Aminu Masari says they have demanded money, but stressed that they would not be paid. On Tuesday, the leader of Boko Haram, Abubakar Shekau, said his group was behind the attack. The Vatican's former ambassador to France has been convicted of sexual assault on 5 men by a court in Paris. The Italian-born Archbishop Luigi Ventura, who is 78, was given an 8-month suspended prison sentence and fined more than $15,000 in damages. He was tried in absentia news.
Hello, you're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Janat Jalil. The Charlie Hebdo attacks in France on a cold January morning in 2015 marked the onset of a wave of Islamist violence that's seen hundreds killed since then. The 2 brothers who attacked the offices of the satirical weekly claimed they were avenging controversial cartoons it had published of the Prophet Muhammad. They shot dead 12 people. They and their associate, who killed 5 people, most of them at a Jewish supermarket days later, were all 3 shot dead by French police. But now, nearly 6 years on, a court in Paris has found 14 people guilty of involvement in those attacks. Charlie Hebdo's lawyer, Wisha Malka, told reporters that the court had sent an important message to those who would help extremists.
What this decision says is that without these networks, there is no attack. Without these networks, there is no terrorism, and anyone who participates in such a network will be punished very severely.
Well, let's speak now to our Paris correspondent, Hugh Schofield. So, Hugh, the 14 people on trial not accused of taking part in the killings directly, but of aiding them, tell us exactly what they've been found guilty of.
Well, we need to draw a distinction between 2 or 3 of them who are clearly regarded as having known about the plan and been integral to the plotting and preparation of the plan. A man called Ali Reza Pola, for example, who went down for complicity to commit a terrorist attack and got 30 years in jail. He, it's now been established, was a close associate of Koulibaly, that's the supermarket, the Jewish supermarket attacker, and knew what was being planned and helped plan it. Equally, there's a man called Mohamed Balouchin, who is actually on the run in Syria, probably dead there. He was found guilty, again, of the more very serious charge of actually planning, preparing these attacks, particularly in his case the Jewish supermarket attack. Much lower down the kind of pecking order, though, as it were, are the kind of foot soldiers of all of this who weren't even recruits. I mean, they were people who did jobs which they were doing anyway in their lives as petty criminals. Ferrying guns from A to B, buying a taser, whatever. And these were people who the prosecution wanted to have convicted for terrorism, but they weren't. And the biggest success for the defence in this trial was that they managed to get 6 of the charges lowered in intensity from terrorist charges to common crime charges because the court, in its judgment, decided that these people, and there were 6 who had their charges requalified and another one, these people were just too unimportant. They did not know what they were doing. They did not know the destination of the arms that they were providing.
And sentences have been handed down.
Yeah, so as I was saying, the most serious one is a life term for this man, Mohammed Baloucine, who we'll never see again, who's probably dead, but he was tried because there's no proof he's dead. And then 30 years for this man, Ali Reza Pola, who's the friend of Koulibaly, and 30 years for his Islamic law widow, who's also on the run and presumed to be out in the Middle East. And then 20 years for some, and then much shorter sentences for some of these foot soldiers I was referring to. One thing we should always make clear in this is that really this, we call it the Charlie Hebdo trial, but really much more it was the Jewish supermarket trial, because all the accused were people who had links with Amadi Koulibaly. That's the man who carried out the Jewish supermarket attack. The Kouachi brothers, we don't know where they got their arms from at all.
And since this trial began, tensions have been further heightened by further attacks which have occurred during this trial. Briefly.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, you could say that the trial brought it all back. It brought it all back literally and figuratively. It brought it all back to people's minds, to the esprit of the French, what it had been like back then when this attack so suddenly happened and shocked them. But it also, of course, has also triggered a resurgence of terrorist violence in the last couple of months.
Hugh, thank you. Since the pandemic began, there has been sometimes feverish speculation about its origin. Now, could we be on the verge of discovering the truth? The World Health Organization says a team of 10 international scientists will travel to the Chinese city of Wuhan next month to investigate the origins of COVID-19. This follows months of negotiations with China. Here's our health correspondent, Naomi Grimley.
The question of an independent inquiry into the origins of coronavirus has got embroiled in international geopolitics and rows about the WHO. The Trump administration has always taken a hard line, at one point even suggesting that the virus had escaped from a lab in Wuhan. It's also argued that the World Health Organization has been too soft on China. It's cited examples of WHO officials praising the Chinese regime for its actions, such as locking down Wuhan, mass testing, and its publication of the genetic code of the virus. However, lots of other countries also said there needed to be a proper inquiry, including Australia and the UK. The Associated Press revealed transcripts of video calls from WHO officials complaining back in January that they hadn't got the right data they needed from the Chinese authorities. And a 2-man WHO team that visited China this summer had difficulty negotiating access to Wuhan. This trip, when it does happen, will probably concentrate on the fundamental biological questions. Did the virus originally come from bats? Was there a so-called intermediate host linking bats to humans? And were the Wuhan wet markets at the centre of the initial outbreak? It's much less likely to look at whether there was any kind of cover-up.
Naomi Grimley. About this time yesterday in the newsroom, our science correspondent Jonathan Amos was telling us about excited Japanese scientists opening a capsule containing asteroid dust they'd collected. Well, Jonathan's here again now with news of more space rubble, this time samples of moon rock brought back by a Chinese craft. The Chang'e 5 landed a couple of hours ago in Inner Mongolia after a 3-week voyage, bringing with it the first fresh samples of moon rock since the mid-1970s. So, Jonathan, tell us more about the importance of this latest space rubble.
Yeah, very happy Japanese scientists yesterday, delirious Chinese scientists today. We saw within the past hour or so the helicopters move in on the capsule that had landed in Inner Mongolia, had come down on snow-covered grasslands. They very quickly put a Chinese flag next to the capsule, and they will move in soon to recover that capsule and take its contents to a laboratory where they can study the samples in detail. Why are they important? They're important because, as you said, they're the freshest samples we've had in 44 years. But more importantly than that, they come from a location on the moon